She said no again, standing by the kitchen counter with her phone tilted away from me, her voice light, distracted, already elsewhere. Not tonight. Again. The words didn't come with anger or guilt. They came the way you cancel a subscription you forgot you were paying for. We were supposed to be leaving for a charity mixer downtown, one of those glass and marble events where everyone pretends they're not measuring each other. She adjusted her dress while scrolling, laughing at something I wasn't meant to see. A man from her circle leaned in too close, said something that made her touch his arm. She didn't pull away. She just glanced at me, like checking whether I noticed. I did. I didn't react. At the venue, she floated, smiled wider than she ever did at home. I stood a step behind, the quiet husband with the stable job, the predictable presence. Someone asked what she was working on now. She answered without looking at me, talked about opportunities, about momentum, about how things were finally moving. Then she added, casually, that the rent situation was stressful this month. She said it like a weather update. Later, back in the car, she mentioned it again. Not intimacy. Not us. Just numbers. She asked if I could cover her rent until things stabilized. She didn't touch me when she said it. She didn't even turn her body toward mine. I waited until the light changed and the street went quiet. Then I answered. One word. No. The car didn't move for a moment. Neither did she. The silence followed us into the apartment. She moved first, heels clicking like nothing had happened, tossing her keys onto the console where unpaid notices were already tucked under a ceramic bowl. She didn't argue. That was the first crack. Instead, she sighed the way someone does when a machine doesn't respond on the first try. Later that evening, her phone kept lighting up on the couch between us. She angled the screen down every time. I didn't reach for it. I didn't ask. I watched her patterns instead. The way she smiled at messages she didn't explain. The way she stopped dressing up for bed weeks ago, but still took her time before going out. The way her calendar suddenly had gaps that weren't mine. The first real nudge came from someone else. At work the next day, a colleague mentioned seeing her at a rooftop lounge across town. He said it casually, like trivia. Said she looked comfortable. Said she wasn't alone. He didn't know who she was to me. He didn't need to. That night, she told me she was exhausted and turned away early. Her phone stayed face down on the nightstand, vibrating once, twice, then still. I lay there fully awake, staring at the ceiling, not thinking, just noting. Dates. Gaps. The absence of anything meant for me. The next morning, while she showered, I opened our shared banking app. The numbers lined up too cleanly. Rent paid ahead. Flights I hadn't booked. Charges that didn't belong to our routines. Someone had been filling the spaces I was being pushed out of. When she came out wrapped in a towel, humming, I closed the app and said nothing. That was the moment it stopped being confusion and became confirmation. I didn't confront her. I adjusted systems. At lunch, back at my desk, I pulled transaction logs the way I always did at work, clean and unemotional. Patterns don't lie when people do. There were transfers landing right before rent cleared. Ride charges from places she said she'd never been. A hotel deposit under a name I recognized from her social circle. Someone she once called just a contact. The amounts weren't reckless. They were deliberate. Enough to keep her comfortable. Enough to keep me unnecessary. That evening, she talked about stress again. About uncertainty. About how modeling was unpredictable and hosting wasn't steady. She said it while standing in front of the mirror, trying earrings, testing angles. She didn't ask about my day. She didn't notice I'd stopped responding with nods. Later, I saw the messages. Not because I went looking, but because she left her tablet unlocked on the counter. Compliments. Travel plans. Jokes that didn't include me. And one line that sat there longer than the rest, about how she hated asking me for help when someone else understood her needs better. I locked the screen and put the tablet back exactly where it had been. When she came in, she smiled, kissed my cheek like a routine, and asked if I'd eaten. I said yes. That was all. That night, after she fell asleep facing the wall, I opened my laptop and separated accounts. Joint savings first, then utilities, then recurring transfers that had been running quietly for years. I didn't rush. I didn't hesitate. By morning, the structure she relied on was still standing. It just wasn't connected to me anymore. She noticed the change 3 days later, not because I acted differently, but because something stopped working. A notification hit her phone while she was in the kitchen, and she frowned at it like it was a typo. She refreshed the app. Then again. The automatic rent payment hadn't gone through. She asked about it that evening, trying to sound casual, like it was a technical glitch. I listened without interrupting, finishing my dinner, wiping my plate clean. When she paused, waiting for reassurance, I told her the payment structure had changed. I didn't explain further. I didn't apologize. The next morning, I left earlier than usual. By the time she woke up, my side of the closet was lighter. Not empty, just edited. That night, I didn't come home. I didn't text. I didn't check in. I slept in a studio near my office, the kind of place you rent when you don't need comfort, only distance. She called once. Then again. The third time, she sent a message asking if I was okay. I didn't answer. I watched the notifications stack, then go quiet. From my window, the city looked the same. Traffic moved. Lights stayed on. 2 days later, she showed up unannounced at my workplace. She stood in the lobby, scanning faces, realizing she didn't know my schedule anymore. I walked past her without stopping, nodded like you do to someone you recognize, but no longer include. That was when the panic shifted. Not loud, just visible. The money gap exposed more than she expected. The man who had been smoothing things over didn't step in this time. I knew because his name disappeared from her transactions as abruptly as it had appeared. A failed investment rippled through his circle, quiet but fast. Deals paused. Liquidity vanished. Comfort followed. She adjusted quickly, the way she always did. New outfits stopped showing up. Ride charges turned into public transit taps. Invitations slowed. The kind of slowdown you don't announce, but feel in how often people respond. She still went out, but the places changed. Louder, less polished, less forgiving. One afternoon, while reviewing budgets at work, I saw his name again. Not in her accounts. In a compliance alert forwarded by a contact who owed me a favor. The investor had been leaning on numbers that didn't hold. Overstated assets. Deferred obligations. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to collapse trust once light hit it. I didn't send anything directly. I didn't need to. Information has a way of traveling when it's placed correctly. By the end of the week, his access tightened. By the next, he was gone from her world completely. That evening, she came home earlier than usual. She stood in the doorway of the bedroom I no longer slept in and asked if we could talk. Her voice stayed even, but her hands didn't. She mentioned bills. Timing. Pressure. She said she just needed help getting through the month. I packed a bag for the studio while she spoke. When she finished, I told her I wasn't funding pauses anymore. Then I left before she found another angle. The shift didn't explode. It spread. Her family noticed first. Questions about why she'd moved some things into storage. Why she was suddenly vague about plans she used to announce. Friends followed, the ones who had leaned on her confidence like it was renewable. Invitations slowed. Group chats went quiet when she typed. People don't ask what's wrong when they sense instability. They create distance and call it timing. I saw it from the outside. At a small industry gathering, someone mentioned her name, then stopped. Another person shrugged and said they thought she was taking a break. The tone wasn't cruel. It was indifferent. That was worse. She tried to anchor herself publicly. New photos. Captions about focus and growth. The engagement didn't come back. Algorithms mirror real life more than people admit. When attention dries up offline, it follows online. One evening, I returned to the apartment to pick up documents. She was there, sitting on the floor with paperwork spread out, trying to assemble order from fragments. She looked up like she'd been waiting for hours. She didn't accuse me. She didn't cry. She asked if I could at least talk to people, smooth things over, help her stabilize. I listened. I didn't step closer. I told her I wasn't involved anymore. That my absence wasn't a phase. It was a boundary. After that, the apartment felt too large for one person. She stayed. I didn't. And the quiet she'd once controlled began answering her back. She tried to rebuild leverage through proximity. Started showing up where she knew I'd be, not dramatically, just enough to seem coincidental. The coffee shop near my office. The grocery store on a weekday evening. She never blocked my path. She hovered at the edge of my vision, waiting for acknowledgement. I gave her none. At home, isolation settled in. Bills arrived without the soft landing they used to have. She sold a few things quietly. Changed service plans. Let go of the cleaning help she once called essential. Each adjustment shrank her world another inch. The apartment echoed differently when only one person lived in it. She reached out to mutual friends. Not with accusations. With concern. She framed it as confusion, as distance she didn't understand. The response was polite but thin. People take cues from stability, and she didn't have any to offer. Meanwhile, my life compressed into clean lines. Work, gym, the studio. No explanations required. I stopped being available by default. Messages from her landed without urgency. I didn't block her. I just didn't move toward her. One night, she waited outside the studio. I saw her through the glass before she saw me. She looked smaller there, stripped of context, like someone who had lost the map but kept walking anyway. She started talking the moment I stepped out. About mistakes. About stress. About how she felt invisible. I listened until she ran out of words. Then I told her I wasn't the place she could rest anymore. I walked past her, key already in my hand. She didn't follow. That was new. The confrontation didn't happen the way she had rehearsed it. There was no dramatic entrance, no raised voices. It happened in the apartment on a quiet evening when she realized I was there to collect the last of my files and nothing else. She stood between the kitchen and the living room, blocking nothing, just occupying space. She spoke carefully, as if precision might bring control back. She said she needed clarity. She said she wanted to understand when everything shifted. She said she deserved at least an explanation. I kept moving. Opened drawers. Checked folders. Slid documents into a slim case. I didn't correct her timeline. I didn't argue the framing. When she paused, waiting for a response, I told her there was nothing left to explain. That explanations are for people still negotiating terms. She followed me into the hallway, her voice tightening. She said she was ready to fix things now. Said the distractions were gone. Said she finally had space for us. She reached for my arm and stopped herself halfway, like she remembered too late that permission used to be implied. I looked at her then, not with anger, with distance. I told her the door she was standing in front of no longer led anywhere, that I had already stepped out of the version of my life where I waited to be prioritized. She asked what she was supposed to do now. I picked up my case, walked past her, and left the question where it belonged. Her collapse wasn't public. It was administrative. The lease renewal came up without a cosigner. The rate jumped. She tried to negotiate and failed. Work dried up in quiet ways. Fewer callbacks. Shorter contracts. People stopped framing her as potential and started treating her as history. No one announced it. They just moved on. I heard about it through channels I hadn't asked to keep open. Someone mentioned she'd been seen asking for extensions. Another said she'd moved out of the apartment. Downsized. Temporary, they said. Everything was temporary now. She reached out less often, but when she did, the tone changed. No strategy left. No framing. Just updates that didn't ask questions. Statements about how hard things had become. About how lonely evenings felt. About how she hadn't realized how much I handled until it was gone. I didn't respond. I wasn't punishing her. I was elsewhere. One afternoon, I ran into her by accident near the building we used to live in. She looked tired. Not messy, just worn down by decisions that no longer had buffers. She tried to smile. It didn't hold. She said she remembered how steady things used to feel. How safe. How quiet. She said she missed that version of her life. She didn't say my name. I nodded, polite, distant, like you do with someone you once knew well but no longer recognize. Then I stepped around her and kept walking. That was when she finally understood that nothing was coming back to save her. The last time I saw her, it wasn't planned. She was sitting alone at a small cafe near my office, the kind of place people choose when they don't want to be seen by anyone they know. I recognized her posture before her face. Shoulders slightly forward. Hands wrapped around a cup she wasn't drinking from. Waiting without expecting. I didn't stop. I slowed. She looked up, surprised, then relieved, like this was the moment she'd been replaying in her head. She stood, said my name carefully, as if saying it wrong might break what little was left. She didn't apologize. She didn't defend herself. She said she finally understood what she'd lost. She said she thought stability was permanent. She said she thought I would always be there. I listened, not because I owed her that, but because I no longer needed to leave quickly. When she finished, there was nothing dramatic in the air. No tension, just space. I told her I hadn't disappeared, that I had simply stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. I told her my life was structured now around clarity, not hope. She asked if there was any chance of starting over. I didn't answer right away. I let the pause do the work. Then I told her that any future would require reciprocity, consistency, and presence, not promises, not pauses, and that I wasn't interested in negotiating those terms. I wished her well and turned to leave. She didn't follow this time. She stayed where she was, finally understanding that silence, when chosen, is the loudest boundary there is.